I was supposed to be the best man at the wedding, until the groom stood up, turned on the TV, and exposed every secret the bride and her bridesmaids thought they'd buried forever. What happened next made half the room flee in shame. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in again. I've got something new to share today and I'm honestly still trying to wrap my head around it. So let's dive in. I used to think Emma was smarter than this. But I managed to keep my tone even, not letting my emotions spill out. Emma, on the other hand, wasn't holding back. Her voice rose, sharp and clear. Did you hear what I just said? Yeah, I replied, steady as ever. You've got a date with another guy this Friday. And apparently, I'm not supposed to care. The shock on her face said it all. She hadn't expected that. Of course you care, she snapped. But what can you do? Like you've said before, I'm my own person, right? I make my own decisions. Her words stung more than I let on. But I nodded. You're right, Emma. I don't own you. You've made up your mind and I can see that written all over your face. So, honestly, what choice do I have left? She turned away for a moment, then tossed a parting shot over her shoulder. I'll come back. Don't let your fragile ego get in the way. I still love you. I'll fix things. You'll see. I looked at her, steady and unflinching. So, you do know it's wrong then? Her face twisted in confusion. What? I never said that. But you kind of did, I said quietly. Just now when you said you'd make amends. People don't say that unless they know they've done something that needs fixing. She stood there, not saying a word, her eyes beginning to fall. The silence between us grew thick, like it was carving itself into both of us. And I knew she understood exactly what I was saying. Our parents, I said slowly, yours and mine, do you think they'd be okay with this? Emma didn't answer. Her silence was an answer in itself. They wouldn't get it, would they? I continued. Because deep down you know you're crossing a line. Her voice wavered. But you said, I could. I never said that, I interrupted. I said I couldn't stop you. That's not the same thing. Don't confuse my restraint for approval. I looked her in the eyes and it hurt. If I had any say in this, we'd be the ones going out. Same dinner spot. Same dance floor. But this isn't about dinner or dancing, is it? It's about who you want to be with. And clearly that person wasn't me. She lowered her head again. The silence between us had weight now. By the way, I added softly, what's his name? It doesn't matter, she murmured. Maybe not, I said. But just know, Friday won't be without consequences. She looked at me, a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it guilt? Uncertainty? You're not just pretty, Emma. You're smart. I've told you that more times than I can count. So maybe you think. I know it might sound like I'm just saying it to keep the peace, but I'm not. I say it because I mean it, because you are smart, Emma. And because I believe that, I'm leaving you to handle the fallout of the choices you've made. She narrowed her eyes at me like she thought I was bluffing. You love me, she said, her voice almost smug. You always give in. You always come back. Well, this is what I want. And when I return, we'll go back to loving each other like always. We'll rebuild. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, grabbed my keys from the counter, and walked out before she could toss another word behind me. The air in the apartment had felt cold all week, but that moment? It turned glacial. By Thursday evening, I'd made up my mind. I packed my clothes and moved into the guest bedroom. She found me halfway through folding my shirts, holding a stack of laundry in her arms. Rick, what are you doing? She asked, her tone caught somewhere between confused and irritated. I looked up at her, feeling like I was talking to someone who just didn't want to get it. What does it look like I'm doing? Are you moving out? Yeah, I said flatly. My wife wants to see other men. You really think I'm gonna share a bed with someone who's made that decision? Not a chance. She let out a short, mocking laugh. One of those immature sounds meant to poke and prod. You're being ridiculous. You're acting like a boy throwing a tantrum. What is your tiny little ego about to shatter? I didn't respond. Just kept folding. Oh, she said, voice dripping sarcasm. This is your move now? The silent treatment? How mature. Real impressive, Rick. Just as I zipped up the suitcase, I paused. Then said one word before stepping out of the room. Consequences. She'd been warned. Friday morning, I was up before the sun. I needed to clear my head. First stop was this high-end salon downtown, place I hadn't been to in over a year. I got a clean, professional haircut, a close shave that left no room for second chances, and yeah, even treated myself to a manicure. First time, honestly. But it felt right. Next door was this men's boutique I'd always passed but never stepped into. I walked out with a slate blue button-down shirt, slim fit, but not tight, along with dark tailored trousers and a light blazer that made me look better than I felt. Thought about buying shoes too but decided against it. Dancing in stiff new leather? Not tonight. I even hit the car wash. My SUV looked like it had just rolled off the lot. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, the sun was starting to dip. I waited downstairs, pacing a little, half hoping she'd leave without saying anything. But no, about 30 minutes later, Emma came down the staircase wearing a dress I'd never seen before. It stopped a few inches above her knees and dipped low enough up top to make her point loud and clear. She paused at the bottom step, striking a little pose like she expected praise to fall from my mouth. When I didn't say a word, she blinked. "Well," she said. "Darn it, I look amazing. Where do you think I'm going?" "Out," I answered, my voice quiet but cold. "What else would I think?" Matching her sarcastic tone, I tilted my head slightly and asked, "What's a clueless, weak husband supposed to do, huh? Just sit at home like some kind of house pet, playing with his little kitten, waiting for Her Majesty to grace him with her royal return?" I shook my head slowly as I walked past her toward the garage. "And to think, I actually believed you were intelligent." Emma rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Well, I can't be late," she snapped. "Danielle hates waiting." I didn't respond. I simply got into my SUV and pulled away, just as I heard her yell something behind me. The sound of her voice faded into the night as my tires hit the road. Danielle and I had a fantastic evening. We met at this upscale wine bar tucked away on the edge of town, just classy enough to feel elegant, just relaxed enough to be comfortable. The dinner was light but good. A live pianist filled the room with soft melodies, and our conversation flowed like we'd known each other forever. We already had a connection from work, so there wasn't any awkwardness. She laughed at my jokes in a way that felt genuine, and there's nothing that lifts a man's spirit quite like a woman who truly finds you funny. Dancing with her. Well, it wasn't perfect. It was like making love while fully dressed, clumsy in some ways but thrilling. We moved together with an easy rhythm, our touches deliberate but respectful. We weren't crossing any lines even if there was temptation in the air. We both knew I was still married and we honored that. So instead of anything more, we stayed in that moment, sharing glances, light touches, a glass of wine in hand, letting the warmth between us hover somewhere just below the surface. Sure, Emma was beautiful. No denying that. She had passion in spades. But passion, I've learned, can turn poisonous, especially when jealousy starts to seep in. And the thought of me dancing with someone like Danielle, especially someone as poised and stunning as she was, would eat at her. As the night wound down, I drove Danielle home. When we reached her place, she gave me a playful smirk. Then, with a conspiratorial grin, she leaned in. "For luck," she said, dabbing a drop of her perfume onto my collar and swiping a soft smear of lipstick on my cheek. Then she kissed me just barely on the cheek. "Go get her, tiger," she whispered. I laughed under my breath as I drove off. I walked through the door just a few minutes before 10. Emma was waiting. "Where the heck have you been?" she demanded, fire in her eyes. "Not your business," I said, calm as ever. I responded without a flicker of emotion, as if we were just chatting over morning coffee. "You never told me where you were going with your mystery man," I said. If I had any decency left in me, I'd ask if he used protection, but honestly, I couldn't care less. I let that sit for a second, then added, voice cool as ice. "You're going to decay from the inside out, Emma? Because I will never, ever, touch that disloyal body of yours again." I leaned against the doorframe, hands in my pockets, calm as could be. "Truth is," I said, "I had an incredible time tonight. Best night I've had in a while, actually. And believe it or not, I have you to thank for it." She blinked, caught off guard. "Gratitude? For what?" I smiled, not out of joy, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who's finally stopped lying to himself. "If you hadn't come up with this absurd little fantasy to blow up our marriage," I said, "I'd have never had the chance to get to know Danielle on a deeper level. What a woman. Just wow. Smart, funny, confident. And yeah, Emma, she's beautiful. Very beautiful." Her scream could have cracked glass. Loud enough, I'm sure, to startle the neighbors or have someone thinking of calling the cops. But I didn't stop her. I let her rage burn itself out. "You know I hate this game," she shrieked. I looked at her, not smugly but with quiet resolve. "Then why," I said slowly, "did you decide to start playing?" That was Friday. Later that evening, I drove my daughter Julia to a bachelorette party at the local rugby club. She looked mature and confident, dressed in a sleek pair of trousers and a soft, elegant blouse. Her outfit was understated, but I had a feeling it was deliberate, like she wanted to ease any doubt I might have still had about trust and honesty. She promised she wouldn't be out too late. If anything comes up, she said, Ander or Jane's husband can drop me off. I nodded, though I told her I'd rather be the one to pick her up. I wanted her to know that I did trust her, but also that I cared enough to be present. Coincidentally, I had done some contract work at that same rugby club a couple of weeks earlier, and I figured I might as well stop in to say hi to Jeff, the manager, and make sure everything was holding up okay. That night, the party was for a young woman named Kelsey, one of Julia's colleagues' nieces, who was celebrating her upcoming wedding to Graham. They'd been living together for about 6 months, and from what I'd heard, Graham was the real deal, responsible, intelligent, hardworking. The kind of man you hope your daughter brings home someday. I even started thinking about whether I could bring him onto our service team. Someone like him could do well with the right guidance. Graham, it turned out, wasn't just a good guy, he was also a highly skilled machine operator. Knew his way around the shop floor like the back of his hand. His grasp of the equipment and attention to detail had already made an impression on a lot of folks at the factory. His wedding was scheduled for the following Saturday, and the buzz had been growing all week. Tomorrow night he was hosting his bachelor party right there at the rugby club. I'd been invited, same as most of the guys from the plant. Even Philip Barrow, the boss's kid who usually kept his distance from the rest of us, was on the guest list. But before any of that could happen, Friday night took an unexpected turn. It was around 9:30, earlier than I expected to hear from her, when my phone lit up. Julia was calling. Her voice was calm, but I could tell something was off. "Hey Dad," she said. "Do you think you could come get me? And Jane too? Things are getting kind of wild here. The younger girls are getting out of control." I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. When I got to the club, I parked and walked in, scanning the place. Jeff, the manager, spotted me right away and strolled over. "They're in the storage hall," he told me. "Big banquet room in the back. The bachelorette party booked the whole thing." From where I stood, everything looked like it was running without a hitch. The music was loud but not obnoxious, the lights were soft, and the staff were doing their thing. I paused to ask Jeff if there'd been any issues with the repair work I'd done a few weeks back. Just wanted to make sure everything was holding up okay. He paused for a beat, looked at me a little strange, then said, "No, everything's good." His tone was off though, like he knew something he wasn't saying. But I didn't push, it wasn't the time. Just then the door to the banquet room opened, and a group of women stepped out, laughter and chatter trailing behind them. Julia spotted me and walked over with a smile, planting a quick kiss on my cheek. Jane followed close behind and gave me a grateful look. "Thanks so much for picking us up," she said warmly. I nodded and glanced back toward the hall. "What's going on in there?" I asked. Julia shrugged. "Nothing too crazy. Just a lot of drinking. You know, typical party stuff." Jane leaned in, lowering her voice just a bit. "They've got a few strippers. Nothing's happened yet, but some of the jokes being thrown around, let's just say most husbands or boyfriends wouldn't be laughing. I had originally planned to stick around, maybe have a beer and catch up with Jeff, but the girls were clearly ready to call it a night. I didn't want to keep them waiting. As we made our way toward the exit, we heard footsteps behind us. Dawn, Adam's girlfriend, jogged up looking a little flustered. "Hey Rick," she called out, "any chance I can grab a ride with you guys too?" Dawn looked rattled, face pale, eyes darting out the window, and she didn't say a single word during the entire drive back. She just sat quietly in the back seat, lost in thought, her silence heavy and telling. I didn't ask questions. Sometimes silence says more than words. The next night was Graham's bachelor party, and compared to the chaos of the bachelorette party, this was a far more relaxed scene. The banquet hall was filled with the usual sounds of laughter, beer bottles clinking, and the low hum of conversation. A few of the guys played snooker in the corner and the rest were catching up over drinks. Graham's future father-in-law was there, looking a bit stiff in his polo shirt but trying to blend in. Kelsey's brother, Harry, hung around the bar with a couple of younger factory guys. Most of the plant crew showed up too, John, Adam, Chris, all three of whom had recently transitioned out of their floor roles into sales positions after the old reps quit without much notice. The atmosphere was easygoing and honestly I was starting to think the night would come and go without a hitch. But then Adam came over with this odd look on his face. "Rick," he said quietly, "can I show you something weird?" He motioned me aside, glancing over his shoulder like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "I found something stuffed behind one of the couch seat backs in the side lounge," he said, pulling me toward the hallway. I followed him, skeptical. When we reached the area, he leaned in and said, "Women's underwear. Just jammed behind the seat." like someone was hiding it. I raised a brow. What were you doing checking the seats? Adam shrugged. I was just messing around. You know how it is. But come on, doesn't that seem off to you? Even though I'd had a few pints by that point, I felt the weight of what he said. My brain started churning. Scenarios flashed across my mind, but I kept my face neutral. Yeah, I said calmly. That's odd. Probably nothing, but thanks for letting me know. I kept that little discovery to myself. No sense stirring anything up without knowing more. I went back to the snooker table and promptly lost another pound to Chris. I wasn't really focused anymore though. My head wasn't in the game. Later on, I tried again to catch Jeff, the club manager, to chat about the maintenance work I'd done a few weeks back. Just wanted a quick update. But every time I approached, he slipped off in another direction. It was like he was deliberately avoiding me. I figured I'd get to him before the night ended. But just after midnight, things shifted. We were all still in good spirits, drinks flowing and laughter echoing through the hall, when Graham abruptly excused himself from the card game we were playing. No explanation. He just stood up and walked away, face unreadable. At first, we thought he might have had one too many and needed a breather. But then his future father-in-law followed after him, his expression etched with concern. A few minutes later, the two of them left quietly. We wrapped up the evening around 1 a.m, but Jeff never came back into the room. That unease I'd been feeling all night settled deeper into my gut. The next morning, Kelsey was insistent about having a wedding breakfast rehearsal, a little tradition she picked up from some show she'd been watching. No one was overly thrilled about the idea, especially not Graham, who seemed emotionally checked out. The only one who voiced any sort of resistance was Kelsey's dad. He hesitated when he heard what it would cost, clearly not a fan of the added expense. But after a moment he just sighed and said, "Well, if my princess wants a rehearsal, then a rehearsal she'll get." Originally, Kelsey's dad had shut down the idea of a rehearsal completely. "Graham's not interested," he had said. "So that's the end of it." But come Monday, right after the bachelor party, there was a sudden change in tone. "Actually, maybe it's not such a bad idea after all," he said, scratching his chin. "Some folks aren't used to speaking in front of a crowd. Might help settle nerves." The shift caught everyone by surprise. Still, we all agreed a full run-through wasn't realistic. Only the key people would be there. That meant the bride and groom, both sets of parents, the bridesmaids, and there were quite a few, and the best man John. His wife Lisa was Kelsey's maid of honor, so she joined too. The officiant and the two ushers, Adam and myself, rounded out the group. Kelsey's father had booked the rugby club banquet space for 5 p.m. on Friday. It was a smart move, considering the actual wedding reception was scheduled to happen in the same hall the very next day. No one had to worry about prep or cleanup at home, which meant Julia could relax for once, and I could enjoy a cold beer or two without feeling guilty. We all chatted freely about the plans, the details, and what was still left to do. The mood was casual, and the club was no stranger to events like this. It had hosted plenty over the years. Graham, though, seemed distant throughout the week. He wasn't angry, just subdued. At the time, I chalked it up to pre-wedding anxiety. A big day ahead after all. Still, something about the way he kept checking his phone or zoning out during conversations stuck with me. On Friday, I looked around for Jeff again, wanted to follow up about that strange exchange earlier, but he wasn't there. Turns out it was his scheduled day off before the big event. After we finished our meal that evening, Graham pushed back his chair and stood up. He cleared his throat and looked around the room with surprising ease. "I just wanted to get a feel for speaking in front of a crowd," he said, smiling politely. There was something different about him. He didn't seem nervous anymore. He was composed, steady. Almost like he'd already rehearsed what he was about to say and no longer felt the need to actually practice. John followed with a short, half-hearted toast. "I'll save my good material for tomorrow," he mumbled. No use burning the best jokes early. We all laughed politely even though his delivery was forgettable. Then Kelsey's father stood. He welcomed Graham into the family with a warm chuckle, adding, "Don't worry, the real speech comes tomorrow and I promise it'll be more emotional." Finally, Graham turned toward Kelsey. "Do you want to say anything?" he asked. She shook her head with a smile, content to let the moment pass quietly. And then, it began. Graham shifted his stance and looked around the room once more. "Well," he said, his voice a little lower, "I've got a few words after all. I've been turning over what I might say tonight, but I figured I'd save the real speech for tomorrow." He paused, and that pause was heavy, intentional. The room stilled. "I do have a few questions," Graham said, his voice calm but charged with something deliberate, measured. The tone carried enough gravity that the entire room fell quiet in an instant. Forks paused mid-air, conversations froze. Everyone turned to face him. "What," he began, "would my wonderful future wife think if I told her I had an amazing time with a stripper at my bachelor party?" A wave of murmurs and gasps broke through the stillness like a crack in glass. Heads turned. Some people laughed nervously, not sure if he was joking. But Graham held up both hands with a grin. "Relax," he said, chuckling. "I didn't. I was too busy getting hooped in snooker. £5 down, in fact, courtesy of my future father-in-law. And I fully intend to win that back." Laughter rolled through the room and you could feel some of the tension ease up. Guests chuckled, shoulders relaxed. But that calm didn't last long. Graham straightened up, his face shifting into something more serious. "Let's talk about marriage." He paused again, scanning the room like he was trying to read everyone's thoughts. "When I look around this room, I see couples, relationships that, at their core, are built on love, trust, mutual understanding, and open communication. That's what a real marriage should be. And I'm glad we're all here tonight to celebrate that." Then his eyes sharpened, the warmth fading from his expression. "Now I have a request," he said, his tone firm. "I'd like every man here who believes, truly believes, that he's married to a woman he loves, a woman who loves him back, a woman he wants to grow old with, to stand up." There was a quiet shuffle of feet and chairs as, one by one, every man in the room rose, including me. Julia glanced at me and offered a soft smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, gentlemen. Please take your seats." As we sat, Graham turned to the women. "Ladies," he said, "now it's your turn. If you're married to a man you love, really love, and see yourself spending the rest of your life with, please stand." Most of the married women stood. Some hesitated before rising. A few women with boyfriends or long-term partners joined them, though the mood had shifted noticeably. You could feel the unease begin to settle into the air like dust. Then Graham's gaze zeroed in on one person. Lisa, John's wife, maid of honor. She stood still, barely breathing, her hands clenched at her sides. Graham took a breath, his eyes locked on her. "If you love your husband, Lisa," he said slowly, "then why did you do that to him?" Silence. Tense. Absolute. Then, without warning, the large flat-screen TV at the back of the banquet hall flickered on. A photo filled the screen, clear, sharp, unmistakable. Lisa, positioned on all fours, her dress lifted. A man was behind her, his face turned away, obscured, but the implication was loud and clear. The image had been cropped, yet it was raw. Too raw to be dismissed as anything else. Gasps erupted. Shouts. The room broke into a cacophony of confusion and disbelief. People covered their mouths. Others turned away. Whispers and raised voices clashed in every corner of the hall. Lisa screamed, one sharp, panicked sound, and stumbled backward, throwing a hand over her mouth. Tears streaked her face as she ran from the room, sobbing uncontrollably. John was right behind her, his voice cracking with fury. Whatever he shouted was lost in the chaos. And through it all, Graham remained exactly where he was, still, centered, in control. He raised his hands again, commanding attention. "Right now," he began again. "We can't go on like this," Graham said, raising his voice just enough to command the room again. "Please sit down and stay calm." There was hesitation. People looked to one another, unsure whether they should stay, speak, or run. But slowly the murmuring faded. Chairs creaked as people returned to their seats. The tension, however, lingered, thick, buzzing under the surface. Julia, sitting beside me, reached for my hand and gave it a tight squeeze. I glanced at her. Her expression was strained, lips pressed together, but she didn't say a word. Graham took a steady breath and continued. "Put yourself in John's shoes. If you were him, what would you do right now?" he asked, scanning the faces in front of him. "Would you forgive Lisa? Would that make you weak? Or if you divorced her tomorrow, would that be cruel? Harsh punishment for one night of betrayal." Nobody spoke. The weight of the question sank deep into the silence. Then, from the far side of the room, one of the bridesmaids, Hillary, stood. She cleared her throat, trying to sound confident. "I would forgive her," she said. "It was just a mistake, a single, stupid night. Forgiveness in a moment like that shows love. It takes strength. It's compassion." Graham turned toward her slowly, his expression unreadable. "You say that," he said quietly, "because you're hoping your husband would do the same for you." The screen changed. Another photo appeared. There was Hillary, clear as day, caught in a compromising position with another man. It was unmistakable. The setting was different, but the implication was as loud as a shout in church. Chaos erupted again. Hillary's husband stood up, fury plain on his face. He didn't say a word, just turned and stormed toward the door. "Babe, wait!" Hillary cried, chasing after him, her heels clicking frantically on the floor. She vanished through the doors as the room sank back into stunned silence. Graham let out a long, tired breath. "Now," he said, "I've got just one more question." His gaze turned to Kelsey. "Do you have anything you want to tell me?" Kelsey's face went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks. Her best friends had been publicly exposed, their secrets broadcast for all to see. But was that all? She sat frozen, lips trembling, but no sound came out. Graham turned slightly, almost as if offering her a chance at peace. "Let's call it even," he said, his voice soft but edged. "A truce. If anyone here has something to confess, especially from the bachelorette party, speak now. Maybe there's still a way forward. Maybe we just need a new maid of honor. And maybe," he added, turning back toward the crowd, "I need a new best man." Silence. Then movement. Dawn leaned in close to Adam and whispered something. He nodded. Wordless agreement. The two of them stood. "Leaving already?" Graham asked, tilting his head slightly. "Got something to hide?" Dawn didn't flinch. She turned and met his gaze head-on. "No," she said firmly. "Not like some people." More tension. More unspoken words. The couple walked out hand in hand. A few people shifted in their seats, watching them go with wide eyes and uncertain expressions. Graham, still calm, adjusted his shirt cuff and reached for the remote. "Most of you," he said, "seem to think the rugby club's cameras don't work." Pause. "They do." He looked out at the crowd, gaze steady. "My boss, Alan, fixed them about a month ago." "I've got it all," Graham said, his tone final. "Everything from Thursday night. This is your last chance." A tense stillness gripped the room, until suddenly, a woman shot to her feet. Her face was pale, lips trembling. Without saying a word, she turned and hurried toward the door. Her husband stood quickly and followed, his footsteps hard and deliberate behind her. All eyes turned back to Graham. He pointed the remote at the TV screen once more. "Oh, and just so you know," he said casually, "the outdoor cameras work too." With a click, the screen lit up again, this time showing a grainy but clear clip. Kelsey, in her dress from the party, was sprinting across the club's back lot. She reached a parked camper van. The door swung open and a tall black man reached out and helped her inside. Julia leaned in toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's one of the strippers," she said. The room broke, gasps, raised voices, scattered exclamations from every corner. Pandemonium. Graham didn't react. He simply fast-forwarded the footage. The camper van began to rock, subtly at first, then more aggressively. The implication was obvious. The footage slowed just as the door opened again. Kelsey stepped out, hair mussed, dress wrinkled, stumbling slightly as she adjusted herself. Her face was flushed, dazed. Her balance was off. She looked wrecked. The room had gone still again. No one could look away. No one knew what to say. Kelsey sat motionless as if bolted to the chair. Tears ran freely down her cheeks, but she didn't move, didn't try to explain. Graham stared at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was hollow, emotionless. "You know," he said, "maybe it's for the best that you told me it hurt too much to sleep with me." He paused, letting the words cut through the room like a blade. "Because I'd bet anything you didn't use protection." As if on cue, the screen changed again. Now it showed screenshots from Kelsey's phone. Text messages. Group chats. Exchanged between her, Lisa, Hillary, and several other women from the bachelorette party. The texts filled the screen in large, undeniable letters. "How was your first time with a black man? Looking forward to doing it again? No, once was enough, but it was so good. Good job." Everyone swore to keep it a secret. "This could cause serious trouble if it ever comes out." "Don't worry. He'll never find out. In a couple of years you can do it again, maybe with someone else from the hen party. Yeah, that could be fun. Definitely good, but right now I'm having trouble walking. Damn girl." Two at once. Each message landed like a hammer on concrete. The room wasn't just broken now, it was shattered. "I've only ever seen that kind of thing in adult films," someone muttered from across the room. The weight of that sentence pressed down like a lead blanket. No one laughed. No one even moved. The silence, though punctuated by gasps and whispers, felt suffocating. You could hear chairs scraping softly against the floor as a few people instinctively pulled back, recoiling as if the images on the screen might somehow spill into the room. Kelsey had her face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling. But there was no hiding from this. No rewind. No undo. Graham turned toward the vicar, his voice composed and unwavering. "Looks like the wedding's off." And with that, he stepped away from the head table. As he passed by Kelsey's stunned parents, who sat pale and wordless, he stopped briefly, just long enough to murmur, "I'm sorry." They didn't reply. Didn't blink. They just sat there like statues, trying to make sense of the nuclear fallout that had just destroyed their daughter's wedding day. The truth was, Graham hadn't even played all of his cards. That much was clear. What he showed was surgical, just enough to detonate the entire event, but not enough to reveal the full extent of what he'd gathered. And I had no doubt he had more. He knew exactly when to strike and when to stop. Just enough to shatter illusions, unravel lies, and leave the pieces for others to clean up. Divorce lawyers and marriage therapists in our little town were about to find themselves very, very busy. Kelsey sat alone at the head of the table, shaking, eyes empty, a picture of ruin. The bridesmaids who had stood with her were gone. The laughter and joy that had once filled this room had been scorched away. Julia slipped her hand into mine, holding tightly as we walked out together. We didn't say a word. There wasn't anything left to say. A few days later, a story broke in the local newspaper. It was buried on the second page, some vague, sterile headline about a police and fire response at the outskirts of town. But the article itself was more disturbing. What began as an attempted theft involving a camper van escalated quickly. The vehicle's owners, two adult entertainers according to the paper, had caught the perpetrators mid-act. A confrontation followed, brutal and chaotic. During the struggle, something went terribly wrong and the van caught fire. Both men were badly injured. Though police declined to comment officially, the article hinted that the injuries had a retaliatory tone. Both victims had suffered severe trauma, specifically to their groin areas. Revenge, maybe. But by whom? It couldn't have been Graham or Adam. I knew where they were that day. Both were on shift at the factory working under me. I'd seen them more than once, hands greasy, clothes dusted with metal shavings. No way they left unnoticed. Still, something didn't sit right. Later that week, I learned that one of the back gates at the factory yard had been left unlocked. Odd considering we rarely used that entrance. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. So, dear readers, what do you think? Was it all chance? Or something more? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.